Magic is dangerous or it is nothing.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's quite a statement to kick things off with from William S. Burroughs.
It really is, and it perfectly frames what we're looking at today, doesn't it?
It does. We're diving into this collection, focusing on very practical, hands-on magic.
That's right. The book is Between Spaces, Selected Rituals and Essays from the Archives of Templum Nigri Solis.
Okay.
Published, interestingly, around Samhain, Halloween 2010.
Right.
By Templum Nigri Solis. It was a pretty limited run, only 88 copies. We've got number 49 here.
Wow, okay, so quite a rare find. And it's important for you listening to know, this isn't like Magic 101, is it?
No, definitely not.
Yeah.
They state very clearly it's aimed at the serious practitioner.
Serious practitioner.
Yeah, offering materials, some advanced, some maybe introductory within that context, but all geared towards, effective, powerful magic, getting results.
Getting results. So this is for people really wanting to get their hands dirty, so to speak.
Exactly. And they include a pretty stark warning, too.
Yeah, that the material can be demanding physically and psychologically, and they strongly advise against misusing it or, using it for anything illegal.
Right. Makes sense given the dangerous quote. Which kind of brings us to the foreword, doesn't it? By Pete Carroll.
Ah, yes, Pete Carroll. A big name in the chaos magic scene.
And he doesn't exactly mince words, does he? He calls the material. There's a whole list.
There really is. Brilliant, crazy, state-of-the-art, sexy, chaotic.
Antipodean, incisive, experimental, outspoken, wild.
Antinomian.
What exactly does antinomian mean again?
It basically means believing moral laws aren't binding, someone who rejects established norms.
Okay, and the list goes on. Provocative, neophilic, magical, and dangerous.
Yeah, it definitely gives you a feel for what's inside.
It certainly does. And then we have the author's own introduction from 2008.
Right, or 2008 C3 PDA using their own dating system.
Ah, okay.
They explain these are temple papers from Templum Nigri Solis, which was a chaos magic temple operating within the IoT.
The IoT.
The magical pact of the Illuminates of Thanateros. A magical order known for exploring the, let's say, experimental edges of magic.
Gotcha. So this work comes from a specific group within that larger chaos magic current.
Exactly. And they stress that the work within the temple itself was really varied. This book is just a snapshot, a fragment.
Right, not the whole picture.
Definitely not. It represents some of their work, but not all of it, and maybe not even representatively,
So it's very much an archival document.
That's how they frame it, reflecting views and practices from that specific time.
And they even had a system, right, with TP numbers?
Yeah, temple purpose numbers. For archival purposes, cross-referencing ideas shows a certain level of internal organization, even within the chaos.
Interesting. And a key theme seems to be freedom, yeah.
Absolutely. A core belief in freedom within magic. Avoiding rigid, static forms.
Which is very chaos magic, isn't it?
It really is. It's kind of the essence of it.
Yeah.
And they give thanks to a few members, Sora, Kaiket, Fretters, Davros, and Liminus.
And another point they make is about language.
Yeah, trying to use non-gender specific terms, magician, as the umbrella term.
Which is quite forward-thinking for 2008, perhaps.
It is. And they also mention the significance, not just of words, but the spaces between them.
Magic dwells between spaces. That's intriguing.
It really makes you think, doesn't it, about the unspoken, the implicit parts of magic.
Yeah, definitely. So, okay, our mission today is to kind of navigate these spaces, pull out the key ideas and practices from this collection, and give you listening a real sense of this particular intense approach to magic.
Sounds good.
So where should we start? Understanding chaos magic itself, maybe, as they define it.
Yeah, that makes sense. Temple Paper 046, What is Chaos Magic? That's probably the place.
Okay.
They call it magic reinstated, like brought back to its core.
Reinstated.
And they describe it as this malleable, explorable art really rooted in real personal experience.
So less about ancient texts and more about what actually works for you.
Pretty much. And they focus a lot on the emotional factors, how magicians consciously push their own boundaries.
It sounds very active, not passive learning.
Not at all. They call it an anarchic dynamic gateway. Infinite possibilities.
Anarchic dynamic gateway. Okay. That sounds both exciting and maybe a little intimidating.
It definitely challenges fixed beliefs. That's the point.
Right.
It encourages you to draw on whatever works, personal experience, other systems, external sources, rather than just sticking to one rigid path.
And the term chaos itself, they have a specific take on that, don't they?
They do. It's crucial. It's not the everyday meaning of, just mess and disorder.
Okay, so what is it then?
They link it to the void. the primordial emptiness. But it's not empty, it's pregnant with all potential. The source, the substratum of creation.
I see. So chaos isn't destruction. It's like pure, raw potential.
Exactly. Fertile ground.
Yeah.
And they emphasize that the real power, it doesn't come from just symbols or fancy rituals alone.
Where does it come from, then?
Altered states of consciousness, gnosis, directed by the magician's will.
Okay, so it's about achieving those states and focusing your intent.
Precisely. Direct interaction with reality takes precedence over just, following symbolic maps.
Which leads to this idea of a subjective universe.
Yeah. Chaos magic uses your personal perception, your interface with reality, to actually create new cosmologies, new techniques that work for you.
So your personal reality is literally the magical workshop.
That's a great way to put it. Yeah. Which means, of course, you need a lot of self-awareness.
Right. Because you need to be vigilant, they say, against old habits, old ways of thinking.
Absolutely. Constantly challenging your own ingrained patterns, embracing new energies. It's all part of seeking that chaos energy, that freedom.
And they have that quote.
Where there is orthodoxy, there is also blasphemy.
Yeah, that one really captures that rebellious spirit, doesn't
It
it?
sums it up perfectly.
Okay, so moving on from the core definition, how did they approach something like, say, divination? TP-093, the chaotic view.
Right. Well, they contrast it with traditional astrology straight away.
How so?
They use that old saying, the stars infer, they do not compel.
Ah, okay, so influences, not destiny.
Exactly. They acknowledge astrology can be associatively powerful, the symbols resonate, but for the chaos magician, it's not a strict science. The magician is the interpreter.
So divination is more like a dialogue, less like reading a fixed script.
That's a good analogy. You're engaging with potentials, not just accepting a predetermined fate. And they admit, all systems, tarot, astrology, whatever, have their quirks. They're not perfect.
They emphasize free association, right?
Yeah, very much so. The power comes from the layered symbolism plus the diviner's own knowledge and intuition.
Though it's flexible.
Highly flexible. They suggest the diviner just needs to let the images speak to their subconscious. It produces an instant snapshot of the situation.
Much more intuitive than just looking up meanings in a book.
Definitely. And it ties into that core principle they state. True and nothing is mandatory.
That again.
Yeah. We must begin to take the nots and don'ts out of our thinking. All things are possible. The only sin is restriction.
Wow. That really underlines the whole philosophy, doesn't it? Freedom above all.
It seems to be the constant refrain.
Okay, so what about gods, demons, spirits? That whole area, Temple Paper 099. How do they view these entities?
Well, their approach is pretty filtered through modern psychology concepts.
Like the idea of the self not being just one single thing.
Exactly. The multiple self rather than a unitary one, which, isn't unique to them. It pops up in psychology too.
And they have that analogy, the pen.
The ballpoint pen model of the psyche.
Yeah.
How does that work again? Okay, so the idea is the casual observer, that's our conscious mind, sees the ballpoint moving on the paper, that's our will in action, and thinks that's the main thing.
Right.
But the real source is the ink feeding the ball, that's the fluid, the unconscious.
So the unconscious is the driver, the source of the will's action.
That's the model, yeah. The powerful, often unseen source.
And this fluid, they describe it as.
Non-local, like an infinite ocean. And that's where the demons reside.
Demons within the unconscious ocean.
Yeah, but they clarify, these demons might seem personal, they manifest in ways related to us, but ultimately they're transpersonal, part of that bigger ocean.
So maybe not external beings in the old school sense, more like forces or complexes within this shared unconscious.
That seems to be the direction they're pointing. They are critical of pop psychology's tendency to make everything purely subjective and personal.
How so?
They suggest it leads to a failure to appreciate that, the universe doesn't just start and stop with us humans.
Right. We're not the absolute center of everything.
Precisely. They talk about the ego being this skin-encapsulated unit with a limited view, struggling to grasp the multidimensional reality of consciousness.
So these demons could be facets of that larger, perhaps non-human consciousness that we can tap into or interact with.
That's one way to interpret it, yeah. It's less about literal entities and more about accessing different aspects of this vast underlying reality.
Okay, interesting. So how does all this philosophy, this worldview, actually translate into, like, daily life? TP-090, the magical lifestyle.
Right. This paper tackles the tendency many people have to compartmentalize magic.
Like just doing it on weekends or in a special room.
Exactly. Like it's a hobby separate from the rest of life. The chaos magician, they argue, aims for integration, weaving magic into the everyday.
So it's not just an activity, it's a constant state of being.
That's the goal. Constantly identifying with your magical identity as a magician as part of the current eon or magical age, continuously reaffirming that you live in a magical universe.
And this shapes your evolution, right?
Yeah, they say magical constructs and experiences actively inform your personal growth. You assimilate new habits, subtly change your environment through this ongoing magical perspective.
Do they give examples of what this looks like practically?
They do. Things that might seem mundane on the surface.
Like what?
Internal affirmations, sure, but also consciously projecting a specific persona in, say, a business meeting for optimal effect. Or subtly working with energy visually or through other senses, maybe for protection. Things that are basically undetectable to a non-magician.
Because it's happening on an internal energetic level.
Exactly. So when magic becomes habit, the magical personality isn't something you just switch on for rituals. It's just part of who you are all the time.
Right. Which might lead to some friction with conventional society. TPIO8, Masks of Respectability, the Magician as Outlaw. That title grabs you.
It does, doesn't it? They make a pretty bold claim here.
Which is?
That the magician's very existence is, in a way, inherently illegal or outlaw in contemporary society.
Why? Because it challenges the status quo.
Pretty much.
Yeah.
Their argument is that Western society maintains its socioeconomic structure partly by marginalizing those who don't fit the mold or contribute conventionally.
And magicians operating outside those norms.
They're labeled mentally ill, deluded, whatever, because their worldview and actions challenge the foundations of the established power structures. So magic becomes a form of rebellion.
And the magician's response is to just impose their will anyway.
To impose their will, yeah, which naturally attracts societal pushback. It's this constant tension.
They also bring in physics, don't they?
Yeah, interestingly, they point to aspects of new physics that suggest a non-materialist reality.
Which undermines the materialist assumptions often underpinning societal structures and mainstream religions.
That's their argument. So the magician, embracing this non-materialist view and actively working with will, is inherently subversive.
And they talk about the counterculture and choosing to be an outsider.
Right. It's presented as a deliberate, strategic choice.
Strategic? How so?
They argue that maintaining this outsider position is advantageous for personal freedom and, crucially, for operational effectiveness in magic.
So being outside the system makes it easier to affect the system.
Potentially, yeah. It offers independence. They include that quote, "Let the darkness hide her children away," M. Phoenix.
Evocative.
Yeah.
So it's not necessarily about being evil, but about maintaining autonomy.
Exactly. A posture of independence that allows for maybe more potent spellcasting against societal norms because you're not entirely bound by them.
Okay. Let's shift inward then. TP-054, Evocation of a Magical Personality. This seems key.
It's fundamental. They distinguish this magical personality from concepts like the inner demon or holy guardian angel, HGA, found elsewhere.
How is it different?
The magical personality is described as the primary vestment or working persona of the sorcerer. It's an alter ego, consciously constructed, to help channel consciousness into will during magical work.
So it's a tool you build, not something inherent.
More like a tool you build and inhabit for specific purposes, and they're very clear. The inner demon, or HGA, should not be seen as some kind of hierarchically higher self.
Right. They caution against rigid divisions of the psyche.
Yes, scrutinize those hierarchies.
They introduce the concept of the Kia, too.
Yeah, the Kia, described as the anamorphic energy of the individualized life stream, kind of your unique essence.
And its relationship with the HGA.
It's complex. They say the Kia's peculiar gnosis, its way of knowing, doesn't really fit into narrow boundaries like the HGA concept might imply.
So while visualizing an HGA might be psychologically useful,
the image is not the thing. That's a crucial distinction they make. It's a helpful construct, maybe, but don't mistake it for the underlying reality.
They quote Dion Fortune on this.
Yeah, we form the HGA as the HGA forms us. It emphasizes a reciprocal, dynamic relationship. It's not static.
So the HGA is like a working container.
A working receptacle for knowledge and power, yeah. A trick of the light, they call it, that lets you access resources while bypassing the everyday ego's limitations.
And they connect it to Jung,
They do, mentioning Jung's idea that archetypes like the HGA, wise old man, daemon, could be seen as the friend figure that emerges in dream analysis or projection.
And they say inner demons, plural, is also valid.
Yes, underscoring that fluidity again. It's not one fixed thing.
Okay, let's get into some specific rituals now. TP-064, a Mass of Odin. Norse mythology coming into play.
Definitely. Odin is framed as the archetypal Western shaman, powerful, linked to the night sky, wisdom, poetry, death. A very potent figure.
And the goal of the Mass.
Extreme ecstasy and gnosis. That direct, heightened state of awareness. It can be done solo or with help.
The preparations sound quite specific. Incense, elixir, drumming.
Very sensory. The incense blend includes oak moss, lichen, sandalwood. The elixir is mead-based with herbs like wild lettuce and skullcap. Rhythmic drumming, ideally outdoors, unencumbered clothing. It's about immersion.
And the rite itself.
Starts with banishing, casting a circle. Then a detailed invocation of Odin, reciting his names, attributes, followed by the hammer ritual, visualizing a red sphere, projecting runes.
Sounds like it builds intensity.
It does. Chanting Odin, 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 the B mantra, culminating in this experience where the god presence quits the practitioner with a scream and ecstatic laughter.
Wow. Intense release.
Very. The commentary notes that while seemingly simple, it's powerful and allows for that spontaneity and direct gnosis that's so central to chaos magic.
Okay, shifting gears from Norse to something more eclectic. TP-067, the Chaos Dance.
Yeah, this one explicitly combines and synthesizes different traditions.
Like tantric dance and Buddhist meditation.
Exactly. Tandava dance and graveyard meditations. It pulls in image rising, shamanic drumming, breath control, even hypnotic induction, all aimed at consolidating that magical perspective.
Preparation again involves specific sensory elements.
Incense evoking Eros and Thanatos' love and death. A potential sacramental elixir with various herbs.
And the process. It sounds like a journey through opposites.
It really is. Starts with contemplating misery, decay, seeing Thanatos' death in a mirror, feeling past hurts.
Confronting the shadow side.
Yes. Then identifying with Thanatos, thou art Thanatos, but then it shifts. Experiencing the life pulse, Eros, thou art Eros.
Death and life held together.
And finally, culminating in chaotic movement and the declaration, thou art chaos. Embracing the synthesis of these forces.
Another very embodied, intense ritual.
Very. And they stress the need for quiet integration afterwards, and banishing if it gets too traumatic acknowledges the power involved.
Okay, next up, TPN8, a rite of Hecate. A major figure in witchcraft.
Absolutely. An archetypal goddess of traditional witchcraft, associated with wild, anarchic energy beyond simple polarities.
Crossroads, magic, the night, the moon.
Ghosts, necromancy. Her crone aspect is often emphasized wisdom, endings, mystery.
The sacraments are interesting. Hashish, garlic incense.
Yeah, quite specific. Garlic for Hecate, a double-edged dagger, and her sigil a crescent moon with a central peak.
And the setup. Naked, 3 circles.
Naked and defenseless, they say, in a dedicated space. 3 interlocking circles drawn, then banishing, statement of intent, lighting the incense.
And then moving into gnosis.
Through the sacrament, chanting, Hecate, Hecate, conjure your mystery energy, ecstasy gateway and key, vibrating a barbarous word, displaying the sigil.
Building 2. Hysterical laughter.
Yes, the invocation moves towards that ecstatic release.
Right.
Then offering items to Hecate, doing the main work, and closing with stillness and grounding. Very direct invocation.
Okay, now for clearing things out. TP-057, tabula rasa, a banishment. Clean slate.
Exactly. A potent exorcism, they call it. Uses a whole toolkit.
Right.
Gesture, spinning, visualization, engaging all senses, symbolic images, telestic images, and extreme gnosis. They even recommend practicing astral senses beforehand.
Barbarous tongues again.
Yeah.
Enochian Latin.
Yes, and potentially instruments like drums or bells to amplify it. The temple is dressed, specific incense like cinnamon, myrrh, sulfur, assume a form of death posture.
And the ritual steps.
Stand erect, temple mantra, inflame the chakras, conjure spheres of bright black light and colored energy using Gnostic calls, i.e. AOU, elemental calls like air, exarch.
It sounds very energetic.
Very. Culminates in raising arms to the Tau position, proclaiming the spell of adamant with Enochian phrases, visualizing a powerful protective circle and guard, a multi-layered banishment.
Seems thorough. Next, TP-062, Mis'a Assassini, a rite of liberation. Liberation is the key word here.
It is, intended for individual performance, with a real sense of dynamic purpose.
And the assassini part.
Refers to Hassani Saba and that famous dictum. Nothing is true. Everything is permitted.
Ah, okay. That fits the chaos magic theme.
Perfectly. They mention using parts of established texts like Liber OZ or an Enochian key as capturing the feel of it,
So what does the rite involve?
reciting parts of Liber OZ. Then a personal proclamation of liberty standing, maybe even jumping, really feeling that release.
A physical expression of freedom.
Yes, and a further proclamation invoking Pan, creation, shadows, the pandemonium, and this call, pay it all back, followed by ecstatic laughter again, very much about asserting individual will and freedom.
Okay. Now for something central to their system, TP-055, Missa Nigri Solis, including Formula 1.
Right, the Missa Nigri Solis Mass of the Black Sun is described as versatile, good for divination, enchantment, especially related to your own life stream.
And the core mechanism.
Creating an eclipse of ordinary consciousness to evoke a black mirror for scrying.
And Formula 1. That sounds ominous.
It evolved from simulated death states, apparently. The aim is extreme abstraction, disintegration of the self-sense, and excorporation of identity before physical death.
Whoa. Okay.
Yeah.
Deliberately confronting dissolution.
Pretty much. They talk about Thanatos programming the death drive. The magician needs to ask, do I want to live or die? And consciously reprogram that life-death force.
They distinguish discorporate and excorporate.
Yeah, discorporate is temporary exit from the body. Excorporate is the final one. It's a direct engagement with mortality.
Intense stuff. Okay, shifting to group work. KP074, rites for establishing a temple. What's their take on a temple?
They talk about a chaos magic egregore, that group mind entity,
Right.
incorporating traditional tools but with minimalism. The focus isn't the physical stuff, but the energy and information the group generates.
So the temple is more like a magical machine.
That's the term they use. A repowered repository, dependent on its members.
How do you establish one?
Key elements: name and sigil, a temple guardian, an artificial elemental linked to the sigil, a temple mantra, sonic focus, and the beacon rite.
The beacon rite.
To invigorate the temple, using the sigil and a massive chaos invocation, it's about creating and maintaining this energetic entity.
And the group mind.
Functions on two levels: individuals working together and also individual psyches potentially fusing into a greater whole.
But what if the group is spread out? TP079, regionally coordinated rituals.
Good point. They acknowledge magic is stronger with more people, but geography is often a challenge.
So how do they bridge the distance?
Coordinated efforts. Prearranged times are key. Shared ritual formats using the same temple sigils, mantras, maybe common props, creating a unified focus across space.
Makes sense. Okay, let's explore time and identity further. TP109, alternate life investigation. This sounds like past life regression, maybe.
Sort of, but maybe broader. They contrast linear time with a magical view of nonlinear progression.
So not just past lives, but potential other streams of experience.
Exactly. Accessing other life streams, past, future, parallel maybe through dreams, ritual, hypnosis.
Using birth or death as gateways.
Yeah, entering a neutral void or seeing myriad colored streams, then navigating along one to experience events, exploring consciousness beyond the here and now.
Fascinating. And for a really radical self-challenge, TP112, Rites of Anathema.
This is about consciously inverting your life for a set period.
Inverting it? How?
Ritually forging a new personal life stream for a duration, defined by being the opposite of your current self in chosen aspects. They even say your inner critic might need to be bypassed for this.
So you state your intent to invert specific things.
Right. Summarize your current life, take a sacrament, then invoke the not-self while looking in a mirror, reaching gnosis.
In that.
Banishment by hysterical laughter, then you live that inverted life for the agreed time. A potentially drastic way to break patterns and explore possibilities.
Definitely sounds like it. What about psychosexual energy? KP119, the Kala Chaotica.
This draws on temple horror traditions, but framed as a vehicle for focusing magical attention and uniting psychosexual power. Moving beyond dogma.
Application.
Furthering magical work, consecration, producing organic elixirs, presumably from sexual fluids. It uses sexual gnosis.
Preparation involves abstinence, elixirs.
Yeah, building energy. Potential aphrodisiacs mentioned. Also, body painting masks things to inhibit self-consciousness and deepen the experience. Harnessing sexual energy directly.
Okay. Then there are the wildfire rites, CP117. What's the idea here?
Making modern magical developments accessible, but also harking back to a primal, proto-shamanic state.
Trying to regain something lost.
Immediate access to magical experience, stripping away centuries of dogma. It's about practical application, aiming for experienced integrated power, direct engagement.
Got it. And sigils again, TB116. Personal sigils of desire, a core chaos magic technique.
Absolutely. Sigils as working models to manipulate reality affect the psyche. They stress the ideal invocation is a constant, one-pointed focus on desire.
And the sigil's the code for that.
An identity code for emotive intent, a calling card to the desired reality. They value personalized sigils over just using standard ones.
Why personalized?
Enhanced knowledge, more power. The key is rendering the desire as a glyph the conscious mind doesn't readily recognize.
To bypass the sensor.
Exactly. Let it sink into the subconscious.
Moving towards more primal themes. TP114, Dance of the Beast Gods. Shamanism again.
Yeah, positioning shamanism as the wellspring, contrasting the modern, skin-encapsulated ego with more integrated tribal worldviews.
And the beast gods.
Interfacing with these archetypal animalistic complexes, theriomorphic energies to access more primal, instinctual power sources, connecting with the non-human.
Okay. And what about communal celebration? TP107. The Sabbat, the ancient circle of ecstasy revived.
They see the Sabbat as central to witchcraft and the essence of magic, a time for play, celebration, ecstasy, which they feel modern magic has kind of forgotten.
So they want to bring it back.
Yes, grounding it in myth and history, remote locations, nighttime, maybe hallucinogens, reverence for a horned deity figure.
But emphasizing ecstasy.
Ecstasy and extreme gnosis are the goals. Raising powerful energy for charging spells, talismans. It addresses the magical self, the matrix of god, goddess, cauldron, dragon, communal, ecstatic power raising.
Sounds vitalizing.
Yeah.
Then there's TP111, a magical declaration, like a mission statement.
Kind of a summary of core beliefs to integrate into your practice.
What does it include?
Interconnectedness, aliveness of everything, power of thought and words, infinite possibility, impermanence, unity, primacy of will aligned with the universe.
And those key tenets again.
The only sin is restriction. Nothing is true. Everything is permitted. All is true. Nothing is mandatory. Really encapsulates the philosophy.
Okay. And their view on the current magical era, TP100, Anno Chaos, the Pandemonium.
They pinpoint Hiroshima as a major shift, unleashing unthinkable possibilities leading to a search for new transcendence, including the occult revival.
Defining the current age.
As the Pandemonium, post-1987 roughly, now is the age of all demons. An age with fewer restrictions, where everything lies potent in the subspaces. A time of perhaps chaotic potential and danger.
Okay. For practical application, TP042, the TNS Personal Work Program. A daily, weekly routine.
A recommended minimum. Integrating physical and psychic training, adopting the warrior stance, overcoming disharmony, finding your place, preparing body and mind.
What's included in the minimums?
Daily. Banishing sitting posture, mantra, kundalini work, self-healing, ego modification, a sweat-raising workout. Weekly. Magical reading, science reading, entering the void.
Pretty demanding.
It's a foundation. Plus, exploring egregores, sex magic, allowing for death, positive affirmations, a holistic, integrated approach.
And their view on science, TP081, Magic and Science.
Acknowledging the gap is narrowing with neuroscience, etc., but science can't fully quantify magic yet.
Cautious engagement.
Yeah, don't seek scientific validation because magic is anti-control, pro-freedom, which they argue science often opposes due to its own structures. Use modern knowledge critically, but don't be subservient to it.
Makes sense. Lastly, TP076, Enochian and the Necronomicon.
Briefly touches on them. Enochian as a receive system, Necronomicon's unique modern status.
Their advice.
Pragmatic, use what works for you, personal efficacy trumps peer opinion or tradition. Classic chaos magic advice.
They also mention Metonero's involuntary altered states like intense dreams.
Yeah, TP1201. And TP049 warns about mania arising from gnosis, misinterpreting intense experiences, the danger of psychic debris when exploring the void, need for integration.
So, a lot to unpack there. We've covered the essence of chaos magic as they see it. Dynamic, personal, experiential.
Their takes on divination, the self, entities, integrating magic daily, the strategic outsider role.
The magical personality, tons of rituals. Odin, Hecate, chaos dance, banishings, liberation rites, temple building.
Right. Plus the relationship with science, thoughts on altered states, group work, time, identity. It's a dense collection.
Absolutely. So for you listening, hopefully this deep dive gave you those aha moments, that quick yet thorough insight into the world presented in between spaces without feeling totally buried in detail.
We hope it offered a useful glimpse into this potent, sometimes demanding, but ultimately freedom-oriented approach to magic.
And that brings us to our final thought for you to ponder. Given this constant emphasis in chaos magic, particularly in this collection on personal experience, on smashing restrictions, on radical freedom, what aspects of your own ingrained understanding of reality might just be ready for a complete reevaluation?
Something to definitely chew on.